Kurokami Medaka is the protagonist of the Medaka box series and is also the protagonist within the Medaka box story as well, because in the world of Medaka box she was born as an abnormal among abnormals, someone so skilled and so powerful that she was always right and always won. However, in order to cope with her godlike nature, she adopted a mindset and a belief that for a time helped her to come to terms with her power and herself, but in the long run only restrained her and kept her from being the strong but free human she always was inside. And so that is what we shall discuss today. If you find yourself entertained at any point during the video, then consider liking, subscribing and ringing that bell, as I cannot explain to you how much such a small action can do for this channel. Also, if you want to support this channel further, then consider pledging to my Patreon. Anyway, on with the video. Medaka was born as an abnormal, a person more special than the normal and more abnormal than the special. Unlike most abnormals who develop their abnormalities in puberty, Medaka was abnormal from birth. She was unique in that regard even among abnormals, hence why she is abnormal even for an abnormal. She has what most people would call a superiority complex, but has the talent to back it up. She was so skilled, so intelligent, so strong that she forced experts in all manner of fields to quit their jobs out of fear of her immense talent. She was incredible in all senses of the word, and she was rightfully praised for it. However, that praise isn't what Medaka focused on. Instead, all she could see was the lives of people ruined due to her actions. She made people's life work seem like child's play. She trampled over the hard work and efforts of others with no effort or hard work of her own. What others fought and worked for, she could achieve in an instant. Medaka hated herself because of what she was. She hated that she was abnormal, and she hated that her natural self caused so much pain and suffering to those around her. She saw her own life as a curse. Her purpose in life was, by her own reasoning, to cause misfortune to others, and her adopting this mindset permanently and becoming someone ruled by self-hatred was a very real possibility. As in the height of her self-loathing, she met someone, not a normal, not a special, not even an abnormal, she met a minus. Someone the opposite of her, someone so bad at everything that they always lose no matter what. Kumigawa's mindset, the words he spoke to a 2-year-old Medaka, was that life has no meaning, that it doesn't matter what you do, as in the end it's all worthless. Medaka at this point was questioning why she was even born. People said that her mother's only purpose in life was to give birth to her, that Medaka's birth was the exact reason her mother died. In other words, Medaka's birth, her existence, was built upon the foundation of death and of suffering and misfortune. Medaka was haunted by this realization, and honestly it wouldn't have surprised me if left to her own devices, Medaka ended up committing suicide at the age of only 2, an abnormal death for an abnormal among abnormals who hated her own life for what it was. However, this never came to pass, as after her encounter with Kumigawa, Medaka met someone else. Zenkichi was nothing like Kumigawa, who gave Medaka words of nihilism, nor like the adults who offered her praise or disgust. Zenkichi was just happy to be with her. The young boy who witnessed a girl his age solve a puzzle like it was nothing but happy. When Medaka talked about how life was meaningless, he refuted her as well. He's a 2-year-old. He's not abnormal and he ain't a minus. He's a normal, so of course at 2 years old he can't understand the meaning of life. Instead he just does what any child does and says what he is feeling. When Medaka asked why she was born, he just said what he was feeling. She made him happy, so that must have been her purpose in life. Her purpose in life, the reason she was born, was to make others happy. It's such a stupid notion, such a simplistic, idealistic and insane statement that it could only have been said by a child. However, those words touched Medaka's heart so much she proposed on the spot. One of Medaka's biggest flaws as a person was her inability to understand others, to communicate with others. Her inhuman nature made her distant from people and so led both those around her and herself to misfortune. However, for the same reason, she always took people at face value and so took the words of a 2-year-old and made them her creed. And that may be the most abnormal thing about Medaka overall, the fact that for 14 years she lived her life in service to the words of a 2-year-old. However, those words were what saved Medaka. By believing her reason for being born, her role in life was to help others, to be of help to strangers, Medaka was able to resolve her inner conflicts. As well, who cares if she is better than everyone else, as she isn't using that ability for herself, no, it's all in service to helping others. She won't ever make people unhappy by being better than them, she will instead make them happy by using all her skill and talent to aid them. The Medaka box is a physical symbol of Medaka's philosophy to help people anytime, anywhere, and that's her role to play in life. She doesn't live for herself, as to do that would be selfish. If she lives for herself, others will be hurt. I think you can now see the double side to this way of living. Medaka may have found a way to live that reconciled her feelings of self-hate, but this way of life came with a catch. Now, although it is not to as an extreme extent as with Najime, the fact that Medaka suffers from, at least in small part, a simulated reality is very obvious. She acts like a protagonist because she convinced herself she was one. Medaka is stronger than anyone, better than everyone, because she needs to be to help others, because as the main character, it's her role to help others. She is treated like a goddess by people as she presents herself like one. She acts like the main character of a story so that in her mind she can become one. As the main character is the good guy, they don't cause misfortune, they make people happy. If Medaka is the protagonist, then it only makes sense she is all powerful. If she is the protagonist, then she doesn't need to worry about being abnormal and the consequences, as a protagonist is meant to be abnormal and a protagonist doesn't hurt people. However, despite how many protagonist traits Medaka has, despite how she never loses, despite how she is always right, and despite how others see her, life isn't a story, it is reality. And Medaka isn't the main character of life, even if she has all the credentials to be so. She is just a normal person. Well, an abnormal person, but a person nonetheless. Not a goddess, not a main character, not a protagonist, she's a human. I mean, just look to her farewell scene with Kumigawa at the end of the Unknown Shirane arc. What does he call her? A human. As in Medaka Box, no matter your abilities, your skills, your nature or your nurture, you are still a human. Which is why her losing in the election to Zenkichi was so important to her character arc. As when she lost to him, it proved something. It proved that she could lose, that she wouldn't always win, that she isn't the main character, as even if they lose sometimes or fall down, a main character never loses in a fair fight the way she did to Zenkichi. In the same way Bookmaker made Kumigawa's loss definitive, Devil Star made Zenkichi's win the undisputable truth, and Medaka's loss a definitive fact. By having Zenkichi by her side, Medaka was able to keep herself grounded. He was like her rock, keeping her from reverting back to her old mindset. He was a constant reminder to her of her mission in life. However, when he left her side and declared he would beat her, something changed. Medaka somehow became even more abnormal. She learned to master minuses as well as abnormalities. She gained new forms and became something even more abnormal, no, even more inhuman than before. After all, one of the explanations given to why Medaka lost the election was that she became too inhuman for people to relate to. And why did she end up like this? Because without Zenkichi, she couldn't stay human. Medaka's biggest flaw after all is her inability to emotionally communicate with others. She fails to relate to people's hearts, and so she needs the one person she cares for most to stay by her side, to keep her from falling completely out of touch with humanity, as he, the normal, is her bridge between her goddess-like existence and the rest of humanity. As long as she acts the role of the goddess, the saviour of strangers, she will never be able to stand equally with people, she will only stand above them. Instead of helping people by coming down to their level, she instead brings them up to her own. And this isn't the way to save people, something she learned through her fight with Kumigawa, where she has to go down to his level to show him the errors in his way of thinking. And so when Zenkichi leaves her, she loses the one human she could understand and so falls out of touch with all of humanity. Zenkichi, as already said, was vital in resolving Medaka's own self-hatred, and although his words saved her, they also chained her. They chained her to a life of helping others but never helping herself, as even if Medaka's heart is filled with love and overflowing love for others, none of that love is for herself. So when she is set free by Zenkichi, by being beaten by him and starts living freely for herself and not for others, she is happier than we have ever seen her before. Because for the first time she is acting with all her talent and strength for herself without feeling bad about it. And by losing to Zenkichi and trusting her role as a student council president to him, she no longer needs to devote her life to saving strangers. She can be content with just being her. She no longer has to live up to the expectations of people and project the image of a perfect goddess. She can just be herself, something shown beautifully when she meets her mother and makes clear that she will forge her own path and not be the person that her mother, nor Surabame, wanted her to be. The simple fact she eats tons of meat upon being free is so symbolic, as before she never gave into her desires, into her greed and gluttony, as she was never acting in self-interest, but now she can happily gorge herself as she's finally acting for herself. And the way she is shown crashing various clubs is also a callback to Zenkichi's own actions early in the story, indicating that Medaka is acting like Zenkichi, and what is Zenkichi? A normal. So what this basically means is that Medaka is finally acting like a normal high school girl. She comes to live for herself without shame because unlike before, people no longer hate or fear her talent. No, her fellow students love her, they were made happy by her efforts and they supported her. After all, another reason given for why they didn't vote for her was that they wanted her to be free of their problems, that they felt bad for forcing all their needs on a first year girl. By helping others and using her talents for the sake of others, Medaka finally received the love she always craved. However, love from others isn't all there is, and so when she steps down from her position, she can do so without being scorned for her abnormal nature and can go and love herself, and so becomes freed from her shackles. However, the most important part is that this new free Medaka is still someone who wants to help others, still someone who wants to save her friends, still someone who is kind to everyone, as even if she used the logic of a 2-year-old to play the role of a good-natured protagonist, the fact remains that inside, even without that logic, she was still a good person who genuinely loved people. After all, the reason she grew to hate herself was because she made others unhappy, and the reason she went to school was to meet new people. It's in her nature to love people. It just took the love of the people she loved for her to understand that she doesn't need some weird logic or role to be herself. As long as she does what she wants, then that's all that matters. And by coming to understand this and becoming free to be herself, Medaka also takes a big step towards resolving her other massive flaw, communicating with others. As simply, you can't understand others till you first understand yourself. In the Jet Black Wedding arc, Medaka is forced to fight against style users, people who use not skills which she can master with her abnormality, but styles which work via communication. This is a hurdle that Medaka still has to overcome, and she still can't communicate her feelings of others and can't understand the feelings of others. Something which through her confrontation with Momozono, she comes to learn, enough to even make a dirty joke. As Medaka is finally coming to understand the feelings of others, the feelings that she was so hurt by as a child that she always struggled to understand but failed to. And this is beautifully paid off in the Unknown Shirahane arc, where Medaka sees through Shirahane's lies and calls out to the girl's true feelings. Before, Medaka would have taken Shirahane's words at face value, but now due to all she has learned throughout the story, Medaka can now confidently say she understands others and so fights for the sake of her friend's true emotions, the ones that Shirahane tried to bottle up inside. She sees between the lies and glances at the true feelings of her friend. And although there's far more thematic symbolism to these two's relationship, I will save that discussion for Shirahane's dedicated character analysis video. In this arc, Medaka ends up using a style for herself, which is a very literal bit of symbolism in terms of her new ability to communicate with others from the heart to the heart. I mean, she even ends up becoming a literal heart. Before, her only weapon was her natural talent and the skills of others she met and copied on a surface level, but now with a style she can fight using her feelings and her words, which is why she's able to use it to fight against Ahiko, as Ahiko is someone who was from a different time, he didn't live in the modern age, and so didn't understand the values of the present, and so only by using communication, a communication to the heart, could Medaka get through to him and hurt him, as even if he is from ancient times, Medaka can still communicate with him, as that's the new power she has gained. As all humans, no matter how abnormal, will always be able to be touched in their hearts. However, as you may already be typing in the comment section, Medaka didn't beat Ahiko, it was Zenkichi and Shirahane. And this is also quite thematically beautiful. As Medaka isn't a goddess, she isn't a main character, she's a human, and what's one of the greatest abilities we as a species possess? The ability to communicate, form connections and ask for help. Medaka doesn't save the day because she doesn't have to. She is no longer the main character who saves strangers. She no longer has to take on the burden of everybody else on her shoulders. No, she is now someone who fights for no other reason than to save her friends, and so in turn her friends fight to save her. By having someone else save the day, Medaka's efforts are proven to not be for naught. She loves people more than anything else, and so she desires to make connections with as many people as she can. Why? So that she can get to know them, become friends with them and love them. The power of connection is so important in Medaka Box, as it's what gives you strength in your hardest times. Even just a few words can save someone and change their outlook on life. And so in Medaka's hardest fight, when she's about to die, her first connection steps in and saves the day. As if Medaka never formed that single connection, then they would have lost there and then, but she did form it, and so thanks to that, they won. Medaka always stood alone. At first she ran the student council on her own, and even after filling out the positions, did most of the work herself. She was the woman who could beat the entire school in a tug of war, someone who stood alone as a beacon, as a goddess. However, this wasn't right, and so in the final fight of the series, in order to show her progression as a character, she had to have her allies by her side and have somebody else save the day. Her friends, her connections. It's really a night and day transformation when you look at the big picture. She went from the lone infallible goddess who required people to write down their requests since she couldn't understand them otherwise, to be a free, happy human girl who could see the true feelings of others and help them even if they didn't ask for it. When she is going to leave the academy, Zenkichi goes to stop her, thinking she is being forced to against her true feelings, but when he sees it's by her own free will, he instead gives her his blessing. as Medaka attended the academy to meet all sorts of people and learn to love them, which she did in just her first year, and goes on to manage an urban development plan where she has to juggle the feelings of all sorts of people. It's just her next step in coming to learn to understand others. The 100 Flower Run is honestly about as perfect a send-off to Medaka books as a series as there realistically could be. Medaka fights all those she grew close to and formed connection with, in order to receive their heartfelt feelings. In a way that is a microcosm of the entire series, a beautiful tribute to Medaka's story of all the connections she formed across the series, be them enemies or friends, as at the end of the day Kurokami Medaka just loves people, and getting to know them, to communicate with them and become friends with them is all she ever wanted in life. She started off as a goddess who couldn't understand others, but by the end of the series she became a human who could understand other humans. In simple terms, she always was just a human. Medaka's arc is truly beautiful, a story of self-discovery and the importance of connection. In my original video on Medaka, I remember saying that she had a flat character arc, and that just isn't true in the bloody slightest, and really shows how ignorant I was of this incredible series at the time. Medaka truly is a one-of-a-kind character, one of the greatest Nijiishin ever created, and will forever be one of my favourite protagonists of all time. And now we've discussed the beauty that is Medaka's character arc, you might be thinking that's all there is to say on the matter, but I still want to analyse a few other aspects of her character. Specifically her name and design and what they represent. First, let's start with her name Kurokami, which means Black God, which is of course in reference to her altered god mode, but can also relate to either her godlike nature as an abnormal among abnormals, or the fact she presents herself as a goddess, and then further to this interpretation, the black part of her name can either reference to the dark side to her abnormal nature by trampling over others' efforts, or to how dark and wrong her way of coping with her issues was. Medaka, her given name on the other hand, follows the Kurokami naming scheme of being an aquatic animal, in this case a Medaka, or a rice fish. And well, although there isn't any clear reason as to why this is her name, my best guess is that it's in reference to how rice fish are treated in the Japanese culture. Rice fish come in many species, and although most are cheap and of little worth, some can be incredibly expensive. This of course is a clear parallel to the Medaka book story, with most people being normals but the rare few being superior abnormals. However, since at the end of the day they are still rice fish, this then parallels one of the key messages of the story, that no matter how special you are still human. Rice fish are also commonly kept in schools and raised by classes, which maybe can be in reference to how being at Hakawani Academy was what helped Medaka grow due to the support and love of the students, and since the main role of the rice fish in schools is to teach kids about the importance of life and caring for organisms, this also lines up with Medaka's all-loving and all-caring mindset. And hey, since the reason the students didn't vote for her in the election was because they felt bad for relying on her, this is symbolic of how the rice fish teaches students the importance of care. And also, since rice fish teach the importance of a life cycle in nature, this is also quite symbolic of the story as a whole, which is all about characters growing and coming of age. Her design on the other hand is a bit more obvious. She is designed in such a way to give off the image of a perfect woman. She stands strong and tall with long hair and giant breasts. Now whether that's most people's definition of a perfect woman, I can't say, but for Nijiishin it clearly is. The fact she is so happy to show off her body in all manners and has no shame in her erotic aspects then symbolises something quite profound. The reason she can do all this and feel no shame is because, as already discussed, until the end of the story, she is someone who didn't give her self-interest any peace of mind. She wasn't self-conscious of her body and how she showed it off, because her personal feelings never factored into it. And so when she is freed by Zenkichi, she changes her hair and outfit to what, at least to me, gives off a more normal high school girl feel. Like, it makes her feel not only less important and proper, but also more childlike, as well. After all, she is a high school girl. So this more normal outfit and hairstyle reflect her change from acting as a goddess to becoming a normal human. As you may have heard me say in my other Medaka books videos, abnormalities are representative of one's nature, in the same way a minus is representative of one's nurture. So of course by this interpretation then, the end quite literally is Medaka's nature, the ultimate skill for the ultimate abnormal. It's OP like her and allows her to instantly perfect skills, just like how she can instantly learn and understand even the most high level of fields. However, the way she does so is almost mechanical. It's like how she can play instruments perfectly, but without any feeling, the sound is just wrong. The end then is a skill that is perfect mechanically speaking, but lacks any heart or feelings, hence why it tramples over the efforts and skills of others by instantly perfecting their skills and bringing them to levels they themselves will never be able to reach. But the end is also a skill that doesn't work on its own. It's a skill that masters others' skills. Without the skill of someone else, it is useless. Connection with others is something Medaka values above all else, which is why people are required for her skill to work. By mastering the skills of others, it's almost like Medaka is trying to get to know others, trying to communicate with them by putting herself in their shoes. However, by not merely copying their skills but mastering them, this shows how flawed Medaka's efforts to communicate really were. She tried to raise people up to her level the same way she raises their skills to her level, but that's not how you get to know people. You don't force them up to your level, you just have to talk to them, just communicate. Which is why even her end god mode couldn't defeat Hiko, as that's not the right way to connect to people. Instead, she uses a style to fight him, as at the end of the day, no matter how abnormal or strong you are still human. And so the best way for one human to deal with another human is by the most universal way humans interact, by talking. And with all that said, I think that's the majority of my thoughts laid out on Kurokami Medaka. There's still a few more things I'd like to discuss, such as how she is foiled by pretty much every antagonist in the series, or how thematically relevant her relationship with Shirane and Zenkichi are, but I think I'll save those for future videos. So I guess that's the end of the video. If you have anything to add, just comment down below, as even if I have over 2,000 subscribers, your opinion is just as relevant as mine, as at the end of the day, no matter how strong or how abnormal we are all just human. Comment of the week comes from Ice CP, and I'm glad you're enjoying the Monogatari content, and don't worry, there's a lot more coming. If you're interested in my literary endeavours, then why not check out my books Gang Fluid Justice and People of Fate Volume 1, available at Amazon.com. And if you want to go the extra mile in supporting this channel, then consider pledging to my Patreon, where for as little as £2.75 a month, you can get your name at the end of the video, like Hikari Desu, 7SO, Smokey McBobby and Rinjack9696. So with all that said and done, I've been Seth the Sin, the Deadly Sin of Geek, and I'm signing out. Stay safe, everyone.